Hi, everybody. Welcome to Pittsburgh Sports Memories. I'm Tim Hannon.
And I'm Steve Word.
And as always, we are going to dive into some Pittsburgh sports history. Steve, what are we doing on this episode?
This episode is titled Memorable Moments in Pittsburgh Sports History. As you know, Pittsburgh sports history is full of lots of moments that we remember, and these are probably mostly from our lifetimes. I'm not gonna remember the 1903 National League Championship of the Pittsburgh Pirates because I don't think anybody who's listening to this was probably alive back then. Although I'm sure that was a great moment for Honus Wagner or whoever else was on that team, beating whatever team was in the National Leagues at those pre-World Series. But these are other moments. These don't have to necessarily. It's not necessarily a game. It might be just a moment from a game, or we even have a couple moments that are outside of off the field stuff that was that really people will remember and still talk about to this day. So I'm gonna kind of start from the bottom here. I think the not the least, but the ones that might be more obscure, and then we'll work our way up to the one that I'm sure everybody's familiar with, the ones that everybody's are more familiar with. First up, and I remember watching this with you. I think I watched this game with you, Tim. Was December 20th, 2007. Pitt 65, Duke 64. This was before Pitt was in the ACC, so Pitt really didn't play Duke all that often. I don't know if this was one of those weird early season basketball games because basketball actually determines a for real national champion on the field, doesn't vote on it. So they're not scared to teams aren't scared to play each other early in the season because it doesn't really kill your season. The memorable part was Pitt played, I think one of the guys got hurt and hurt his leg. I forget the guy's name, but that was pretty dramatic in that game too. But Levance Fields hit a step back three in overtime with 4 seconds to take the lead, and Duke missed their last second miracle shot. They missed it, and Pitt beat Duke 65-64. And that was a big win for the program. I don't know what Duke was ranked at that time, but I'm sure they're always good. And Duke's a name you always want to beat, and people always love to beat Duke. I don't hate Duke. A lot of people hate Duke. Do you hate Duke, Tim? Or are you a Duke
I was
person?
actually in the '90s. I was a huge Duke fan, so a lot of people hated that. I know a
Yeah.
lot of people hated Duke, so I always went against the curve there. And so I thought it was really cool to see Pitt playing Duke because wow, Pitt's playing Duke, and Duke was always my favorite team. And Coach Krzyzewski, I've always thought, it's just I have so much respect for him, and so it was neat to see them playing. Of course, now they play all the time because they're in the same conference, and it was like, oh my gosh, not only was Pitt playing Duke, but they beat Duke. So yeah, that was a pretty cool moment for the program.
And it was in Madison Square Garden. That was back in the days when Pitt kind of owned the Garden. The Garden was the home away from home for them because they would recruit New York so well with Barry Rorison and Jamie Dixon and Antigua might have been on the staff, but yeah, they really did well in New York, and they always loved to play in the Garden. It's a shame that's all kind of went away. Maybe Jeff Capel can get them back to prominence there. 1979, September 1st, the Pirates 5, the Giants 3. The thing that's memorable about this game, it's just kind of like a late regular season game that the Pirates did win, but Chuck Tanner had did something very unconventional. Chuck Tanner was a very unconventional manager for that time. The more conventional guys were oh god, who was the guy from the Orioles?
Earl Weaver.
Earl Weaver, yeah. You get your big pitcher that wins 20 games and you sit back and wait for a 3-run homer. That was kind of his strategy. Well, Chuck Tanner liked to steal bases and use his bullpen and do a lot of crazy stuff. And this was one of them. He had wanted he didn't want to take Tekulve. He brought Tekulve in the ninth, and he didn't want him to take him out because in baseball there's not unlimited substitution. But there was a left-handed. He wanted to bring in a left-handed pitcher, Grant Jackson, to face a left-handed hitter for the Giants. So what he did was and there was 2 outs. So he put Tekulve in left field, and he put Grant Jackson at pitcher and figure, okay, if Grant Jackson doesn't get this guy out, I can put Tekulve back at pitcher. Well, Tekulve is like not an outfielder. He's like a pitcher. So there was some risk, but I mean, left field, like what are the odds? But unfortunately, the odds were like Grant Jackson. I guess the guy hit the ball to left field, and thankfully it wasn't too hard of a play. Tekulve was able to run up and catch it. And that's the old baseball saying, you know, if you can't hide, like if you try and hide somebody, the ball will find them. But and for Chuck Tanner and Kent Tekulve, it all worked out. He was able to make the 3rd out, and the Pirates won. And I think that was a pivotal game too in their run for the pennant that year in '79. But a fun one, and not too obscure. I've heard that one before, but just a fun memory and moment in that game.
Yeah, and definitely a risk that could have backfired if Tekulve like misplays the ball or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting that he had the guts to try that.
Yeah. Moving on to 1996, Pitt 41, WVU 38. The most memorable part of this game was Pitt was in overtime down. I think they were down a touchdown at that point, and they had a 4th and 17. And it's very rare that you convert a 4th and 17, but Pete Gonzalez found Jake Hoford for 20 yards, and Pitt was able to keep the game alive, and they did score on the next play a touchdown to take the lead and eventually win the game. But the big memorable moment, at least for Pitt fans, not West Virginia fans so much, was Pete Gonzalez 4th and 17. Pete only played 1 year, but that was probably his most memorable moment at Pitt, even besides beating Miami at Pitt Stadium in that same year. But
yeah, that was. I think we said 96. I think it was 97. It was Walt Harris's first year,
okay.
and that got them into the Liberty Bowl, which was unheard of in that time. The 90s were just such an awful decade for Pitt. They never really won more than 3 games a season most of those years, and so for them to win at Morgantown on a 4th and 17 play in overtime, that was just super dramatic, and it got them into a bowl game. So. Yeah, that was a great moment for Pitt fans, and it wasn't it didn't win them a championship, anything like that, but it just so much like suffering all the years before that, so much just bad football, and finally they won a big game. So it was a big moment at the time.
Yeah, and they beat Miami that year too.
Yeah, at Pitt Stadium, yes.
Yeah, it was the last time they beat Miami and Pittsburgh until they beat them like 3 years ago.
Yeah, Kenny Pickett's first game.
Yeah.
At quarterback, yep.
Sticking with the Pitt theme here for the next couple. In 2000, Penn State and Pitt played in Three River Stadium while they were building Heinz Field, and Pitt Stadium was being ripped down to make the Peterson Event Center. But this was a big game because Joe Paterno kind of got angry at Pitt, and it was short-sighted on Pitt, but at the same time, Paterno was petty about it. And I guess when you're Joe Paterno and they let you do whatever they want up there at State College, you can be as petty as you want. He decided he didn't want to play Pitt anymore, so he made like an unreasonable, like he wanted Pitt to play 2-for-1s or 3-for-1s. And it really wasn't about the money. It was just about sticking at the Pitt and making a demand that he knew Pitt would never, go to. So this was going to be the last game. This was the last game until 2016. Yeah. So 2016, this was the last time that Pitt and Penn State played. And it was the last time Joe Paterno coached against Pitt. So 12-0 was the final score. The most memorable part of this game was Rod Rutherford, the future quarterback. He was a freshman. They put him in a wide receiver, and Turman found him. And he went like 80 yards, 60 yards, something for like a long touchdown, and it was 12-0. The defense shut Penn State out, and Joe Paterno took 12-0 to your grave, buddy. Put that along with your other accomplishments on there, right? Yeah. Maybe we should get the Penn State fans along with their little 498 sticker that they're so proud of, 12-0 sticker for them.
Yeah, it was fun. It was like you said, all of us Pitt fans just couldn't stand Paterno, couldn't stand the arrogance, couldn't stand Penn State. and it was the last. And you knew it was going to be the last game for a long time. You had no idea it would be almost 2 decades before they play again. And I went to that game, Steve, and I remember I was like, I don't care what happens the rest of the season, because it was like the second game of the season,
Yeah.
September. And I was like, they could lose every game after this if they just beat Penn State. And I still have a shirt. I wish I would have worn it today, but I still have a shirt with the score on it of Pitt 12, Penn State nothing.
Yeah, that was a big one for Penn State fans. Sticking with the or Pitt fans, I mean, sticking with the Pitt theme. In 2016, we mentioned this season, Pitt played Villanova in a tune-up game, and that's normally these little games because they don't really play a preseason, so these are really preseason games, even though they count for a win in your record and a loss if you lose them. Pitt 28, Villanova 7. It was just a very emotional game because it was James Conner's first game back from cancer. And I remember I was at this game, and I remember when he literally took that defensive back. I mean, okay, it's a Division II FCS defensive back, and just took him and said, okay, we're going to the end zone. And, that guy got a free ride for 5 yards into the end zone. I mean, that was pretty emotional. Everybody was pretty, it wasn't just like excited. It was just emotional. It was nice to see him back. Good to see him overcome the adversity of his cancer and stuff, and standing ovation for a 7-0 lead, and that was just a great moment. And 2016 was an interesting season for Pitt. we should really do a podcast on that one.
We should, and that was
it's probably
cool.
the most Pitt season ever, I would say.
I would agree. And James Conner was so inspiring, and I was so excited when the Steelers drafted him. He was going to keep playing here in the city, and just a great story. And Steve, I think you were at that game, correct?
Yes, I was. I was in the end zone that he scored in too, so because I sat in that end zone at that time. But sticking with 2016 Pitt season, the biggest win from that season would be Clemson 42, Pitt 43. The big moment from this game was Chris Blewett, and of course all the announcers had to make fun of his name. He kicked a 42-yard field goal at the end of the game to pull out a 43-42 win for Pitt. Clemson would go on to win the national championship, and this was in Clemson. And the funny backstory about this is Clemson ducks us. Like, Clemson never wants to play Pitt. And I don't understand it. Like, they're the only team I can legitimately say doesn't fear. Like, I think they're afraid to play us. And maybe rightfully so. They hadn't lost a home game to an unranked opponent in like 6 years. Like, especially under Dabo Swinney. Like, they just, like, for some reason, they really don't like to play Pitt because they were supposed to play Pitt. Remember the Big East ACC settlement? There was like a lawsuit and stuff. Instead of playing Pitt that game, they just paid the penalty. But this was I think this was a conference game, and they ended up having to play Pitt in Clemson. God forbid Clemson ever come to Pittsburgh. That'll never happen. Come north of the Mason-Dixon line. Ooh, scary. But it was a great win, and Chris Blewett was the memorable hero of that because he missed a field goal at the end of the half badly, kicked it into the line. And then that, of course, the shot. I think he missed an extra point too, and like Narduzzi like gave him a kiss like halfway through the first half or something, and to see a kid come back and make a nice little atonement for himself, and that was a great moment. And I predicted it. It was funny because I predicted that in August. I said that guy I work with, I said, Pitt's going to win this game. That's the most Pitt thing they'll do is they'll go down to Death Valley and win. I should have bet money on it. I really should have.
Yeah, it is the most Pitt thing ever to, lose to some MAC opponent one week and then beat the number 2 team in the country at their home stadium the next week.
And they go on to win a national championship.
Well, that's the year they had Deshaun Watson. I mean, they're always a well-oiled machine, but that year they were extra well-oiled. And it wasn't like the Pitt defense really, I mean, they scored 42 points, but Pitt still kept up, and I know, one of the big plays was they stopped them on a 4th and 1 late in the game.
Yeah, Gallman, they tackled. That was Columbus, who I always like kind of ripped on, but he made it was a defensive end turned him back in, and Columbus cleaned up the tackle and actually made a play. And I mean, I always never thought much of Columbus, but boy, he really made a play on that 4th and 1, because that was 4th and 1 too. That wasn't like 4th and long.
Yeah, and that was if they converted,
They would have iced the game.
The game's over. So yeah, I remember watching that thinking like, this is nice. Like, it's cool they kept up with them, but there's no way they're going to actually win it. And then when that field goal went through, I was like, oh my Lord, they actually are going to beat Clemson in Clemson. Like, that was hard to believe. But again, that's how Pitt rolls. You never want to play Pitt when you're the number 2 team in the country, because they have a whole history of beating.
Yeah, because they beat Miami like the next year.
They beat Miami when they were number 2. They beat West Virginia when they were number 2. They beat Notre Dame when they were number 2. It's just a whole history of you don't want to play Pitt if you're number 2.
Yeah,
number 1, number 3, 5.
Because Pitt's like, I think 17-1 against 1-ranked teams. They've only tied Army. They've never beaten a number 1 ranked team in football.
Yeah, so make sure you get your ranking up or down by 1 if you're going to play Pitt.
Yeah. Moving on to 2009, Game 7, the Penguins 6, Capitals 2. The big moment in this game, really, and it set the tone to the game, and I think kind of put the Capitals like in their place, was there's a breakaway by Ovechkin early in the game, and Fleury just absolutely stones him. And I think at that point, the Capitals realized that they were the Capitals and the Penguins are the Penguins. And no matter who you are, except for one time ever, they're just some teams in different sports that always beat other teams. The Islanders always beat the Penguins. The Steelers always lose to like the Packers or Bears. And for some reason, the Penguins beat the Capitals. They have their number. They just always do. It doesn't matter what the Capitals do. It's just, they're always going to beat the Capitals. And sorry, Capitals. But they ended up scoring 6 goals, and that was like kind of the early like Ovechkin Crosby rivalry era.
Yep, and that was so satisfying that the Penguins were down 2-0 at one point in that series, and they came back and won in 7. And that Game 7 was at Washington too, so that made it even sweeter.
Tim, that doesn't even matter because it's all Penguins fans anyway. Like if you go on the internet, like it's like half the what is that? The Verizon Center is Penguins fans anyway. So.
Yeah, but it was a big moment. We did an episode. If you haven't heard it, go back and listen. But we did a whole episode about that Cup run, and that series was so. Really, that was the big. Obviously, the Red Wing series, but that one was the big series to get there. So.
Yeah. Moving to 1995, Colts Steelers AFC Championship game. The Steelers survived the Hail Mary at the end of the game. That's kind of the memorable moment. I mean, it was 3 more yards, but I think more of the moment I remember is like the Hail Mary hitting the ground at the end of the game more than – I mean, Bam Morris's touchdown was like, what, a 1-yard run? I think more, and especially like that Phil Simms was yelling and screaming, wearing his Jim Harbaugh jersey and, really rooting. And that's another one of those teams that always beat other teams. Like the Steelers always beat the Colts. Like it doesn't – and the Jets. Like the Colts and the Jets, that I don't care. Both those teams could be undefeated and fielding the best team they've ever had. The Steelers are probably going to beat them.
Yeah, that was dramatic. It's another one we did a whole episode about that 95 team, and to get to the Super Bowl that way was super dramatic and made your heart drop a little bit when that Hail Mary started.
It was Randy Fuller, wear number 29, who knocked the ball out. So I don't know if there's any irony there because Barry Foster had been the guy before that had dropped the pass. Yeah, so.
Oh, good point.
Anything to that? Moving forward to 2013, the Reds-Pirates Wild game. This is the Cueto game. The most memorable moment from this game is Johnny Cueto getting rattled by the fans. And, I've never seen a professional athlete fall apart like that before, but that happened to poor Johnny Cueto, and he's actually a pretty good pitcher and just wasn't his day, I guess, as you would say. And, normally that's the Reds normally beat the Pirates, and that goes back to the 70s. Like the Pirates normally don't beat the Reds, but on that night in 2013, the Reds walked into a buzzsaw of fans that had 20 years of pent-up frustration, and Johnny Cueto became the what would I say, the target of that frustration. Unfortunately for him and the Reds.
Yeah, another one we did a whole episode on, and like you said, Steve, very similar to what we said about the '97 Pitt team that beat West Virginia. It was kind of like all that frustration kind of culminated into one game, finally one big win after years and years of, bad memories. So that was a very cool moment.
1982 Sugar Bowl, Pitt 24, Georgia 20. The most memorable part of this is there was a last-minute touchdown pass to tight end John Brown. I think it was on 4th down. Georgia had Herschel Walker, but Pitt was able to keep him in check. I guess Georgia fans were talking a lot of trash before the game. We're going to beat Pitt and all this, and then after losing in Atlanta, which where's Atlanta? What state is Atlanta in? Oh, Georgia. That's right. Oh, it was a home game. Oh, they were nowhere to be found. I guess they found somewhere better to be, and there were no chance of SEC. Or I don't know. Pitt wasn't in a conference, so maybe Pitt chanted independent at them. But the fun part is that Marino threw a nice touchdown pass. And I remember there was a game. I don't remember when, but it was years ago at like halftime, and they reenacted it. They reenacted the play. I don't know why Pitt did that. It was an odd thing to do, but they did it. And John Brown was like probably in his 50s, and so was Marino, had been retired for 10 years. They completed the pass, but that was an odd thing for Pitt to do. But at least we got to celebrate the '82 Sugar Bowl.
And the thing about that game was it was Marino's senior year, which was a disappointing season. Jackie Sherrill had left, and Foch Fazio had taken over, and Marino just didn't have a great senior season. Like Pitt had a lot of expectations that year, and it didn't work out as well as everybody had hoped. But that was a nice way for him to end his career at Pitt, was on a last-second touchdown pass on 4th down.
I think they were 11-1. Were they 11? Yeah, they lost to Penn State. That was the only Penn State fans like. That's like their third. That's like their 13-9.
Yeah, I just know Marino, like performance-wise, just didn't have a great year because that was one of the reasons he fell in the draft. That and rumors about him using drugs and things of that nature.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about that too, with the fact that the Steelers couldn't be bothered to call across the street. But hey. That's why, the late, what's his name? Coach of the Dolphins, has the win record, has the all-time NFL win record, and Chuck Noll doesn't. I've said that before. I'll say it again. Drafts have consequences.
They do.
That was a great win for Pitt, and probably that was probably the height of Pitt's run from the 70s to the 80s, and Pitt was never really the same after that. After Marino and Hugh Green and them left, Pitt really just was in decline, and so Pitt's never really reached those heights since. Quite honestly, I mean, the closest they came was under Wannstedt.
True.
Game 1, Stanley Cup second round. The Rangers beat the Penguins 4-2. The memorable moment is that Adam Graves slashed Mario Lemieux and knocked them out for the series. And it was a total cheap shot. And that was the whole I want to say strategy of that Rangers team was, well, we don't have enough skill to really compete with the Penguins, so we're going to goon it up. So they decided that, they should have just changed their name to the Flyers. But that was a really ugly cheap shot. I don't think did Graves even get suspended for that? I don't even.
He may have, but
it was one game, or it wasn't even anything serious.
And it didn't. You could have kicked Graves out of the league. It would not have been the equivalent of losing Mario Lemieux.
But the best part was the Penguins go on to win the game, win the series in 6 games, and back then that was 1991,
92.
92. That was the 92 run. Okay. Well, the Rangers hadn't won the Stanley Cup since 1940. And the best thing to do to a Rangers fan is 1940. So I guess we can start 1994 now. That's been like 20 or 30 years. So we can start chanting 1994 at them.
It just doesn't have the same ring to it. I do miss
No,
the
no, but
1940 chant.
I mean, the Civic Arena just let them have it. I
Yes.
mean, so that's probably part of the memorable moment is not just the fact that like the Rangers are a bunch of dirty bums that year, but the fans and the Penguins kind of got the last laugh, and the Rangers had to wait a couple more years to win their Stanley Cup.
I hated the Rangers so bad back then, and I was so angry because then they won game 3 and they were up 2-1, and it was like, oh, now they're just going to win the series because they took out the best player in the league. Like how unfair was that? I just, and everybody, like you said, it was an obvious cheap shot. I remember I remember Kevin Nealon on Saturday Night Live even doing a joke about it on Weekend Update because it was such an obvious intentional cheap shot.
Well, he wasn't even going for the puck. I'm not even sure Lemieux had the puck. He just literally just was like, oh, there's his hands. Let me hit him with my stick.
And it was like a baseball bat kind of swing at his wrist. It was garbage, and it was so satisfying to take them out and have them not win the Stanley Cup again. I will say one thing, the next season, the Penguins played in Madison Square Garden after Mario came back from cancer, and he scored 5 goals, and the fans there all gave him a standing ovation. And so I think I was a little more softened towards the Rangers fans after that because it was such a classy thing to do. But in '92, boy, I hated their team. I hated their fans. And Adam Graves will live in infamy in this town, I think, forever.
Yeah. Another great moment, Super Bowl 10, the Steelers won 21-17 over the Cowboys. I think it was their first time beating the Cowboys. The memorable moment from this game is Roy Gerela missed a field goal. Like, if you go back and watch those old Super Bowls, I don't know if you have them on tape, or the NFL probably sells them now on DVDs. I think the NFL's finally kind of caught on to that like there are fans that want to watch these old games, and you can buy the old games now. You don't have to like, I got, I'll trade you, like behind the back alley Super Bowl trading deals, But the funny part was Roger Gerela missed a lot of field goals because he was I think he was like a pendulum kicker. He was not a stalker style kicker, so he did miss his fair share of field goals. And this was one of them, and it was in the Super Bowl. And Cliff Harris, he's just a class act. Isn't he a guy who, no, he wasn't the guy that said Bradshaw couldn't spell cat with the C and T.
Yeah, that was Hollywood Henderson.
Yeah, but he was the one who made excuses in the next Super Bowl that, I was in position and Bradshaw threw it to the wrong place or something. I think he's the one that whines about that or something like that. But before that, Cliff Harris was still being a jerk and decided to taunt Roy Gerela, said, good job, good miss, So Jack Lambert, who was playing special teams at that point, picked him up by his throat and chokeslammed him and said, that'll cool your butt off. Only he didn't say butt. And if you go back and the Steelers talk about that, they said that was like that kind of fired them up, and they weren't really intimidated by the Cowboys at that point. And they went on to win that game. So big pivotal moment that, really there was no scoring or anything on, but just the fact that like the Steelers and Jack Lambert in particular weren't going to put up with like the Cowboys trying to talk crap like they always did on everybody. He was like, no, we're not going to put up with your BS from Dallas.
Yeah, it was great. It was another team that everybody loved to hate. And they were America's team and all this nonsense. And, for him to just come up and, yeah, good job, good miss, idiot. And then, for Lambert to stick up and say, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. It definitely sent a message. And again, so satisfying. The most important thing is then, you beat them on the scoreboard, which they did twice.
Yeah, and I think the Cowboys, those 70s Cowboys still cry about those games. They're like almost as bad as the Raiders. Maybe not as quite as bad as the Raiders, but I would say they're sad. Like they cry about losing to the Steelers as much as anything. And it's funny because when the Cowboys finally beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl at Super Bowl 30, like all those 70s Cowboys acted like that was their win too. And it was like, well, you guys still didn't beat the teams from the 70s. You still lost them Super Bowls.
Yep.
1991, Game 6, the first round of the Devils. The Penguins win the game on a Frank Pietrangelo save. The save where he actually misplayed the puck if you watched. It's actually like he wouldn't have had to make the save if he just would have made like the first save that was kind of normal. But Peter Stastny had a wide open net and apparently decided to shoot it like Pietrangelo's glove looked really inviting. So, but it was a great moment, good save, and it like propelled the Penguins to the win in that series and their first Stanley Cup run.
I've seen that replay a million times. I still don't know how Pietrangelo makes the save. I mean, it's an automatic goal.
He literally had the whole net though. It's like he shot it into his glove.
It's amazing. That series was so frustrating too because the Penguins, when the Penguins got into the playoffs that year, there were a lot of high expectations. They had a really good regular season, and the Devils came out and just frustrated them the first 3 or 4 games. I think they were down 3-1 in that series, and it was like, oh my gosh, and the Penguins were just going to lose in the first round. Everybody had all these high hopes they were going to go deep into the playoffs. And everybody remembers Frank Pietrangelo for making that save. What a lot of people don't remember is that Frank Pietrangelo was a guy that everybody loved to hate. He was kind of like that, like Dwayne Washington or Chad Scott, kind of, that guy that always got blamed when things went wrong. And if he had to play, oh no, Pietrangelo's in, he stinks. And no one remembers that. Everybody just remembers he made the save, and good for him because now he has that moment. Kind of that's his legacy in Pittsburgh instead of the goaltender that nobody wanted to see play.
I think he had up and down. Like he was very up and down. Like he would make great plays, but he'd let in like a weak goal at times. And obviously, he made a great save when they needed the most.
Yep, he did.
But I think that was Game 6, and they had to play Game 7 after that. But they would have been down 2 goals. I think were they ahead? They were down at that point. I think.
I believe so. It was just a big, like you said, it could have turned out very differently had he not made that save.
Yeah. 1971, Game 7 against the Orioles. I'm just going to go with Steve Blass here. Steve Blass pitched a 1-run, 4-hit complete game. It was probably one of the greatest clutch pitching performances in Pirates history. Him and Clemente really carried the team. If you've watched that Game 7, I've seen a replay. It really is. Like, I think they score one other run on somebody, but like him and Clemente just were like absolutely like nobody else on the Pirates did much of anything in that game. And Blast, that's probably like I can't think of another Pirate pitching performance that was as needed or as clutch as that one. And it delivered them a World Series, and they hadn't won the World Series in 11 years at that point, which that seems like a short time now compared to how long it's been now. But
and that's so big in sports when you have the big huge clutch moment and you need somebody to step up, and Steve Blass was up for the task. And he obviously then became an announcer for years and years, so Steve Blass is deeply ingrained into Pirates lore.
And he's another guy, like he had a what I want to call a meteoric career, like kind of like not a very good long career. For some reason, after that season, he just couldn't throw a strike. I don't know if he lost his confidence or just like they've asked him about it, and he can't even really explain it. And it's a shame because he had his moment, and it's how it is in, I guess, sports and life. Sometimes you got your moment, and sometimes you just can't sustain it or recapture it. But at least you had that moment, him and Frank Pietrangelo. Okay.
Yeah, Frank Pietrangelo, Max Talbot. I mean, you could go up and down the list of guys that just had their one moment of coming up clutch when a Pittsburgh team needed them to be clutch. Even some of the stuff we're going to talk about later, some of these guys, some of them are Hall of Famers. Some of them kind of flamed out quickly in Pittsburgh, but they'll always have that moment. And, if that's all they have, that's still pretty good.
Yeah. Staying with the Pirates theme, 1979 World Series Game 7. Once again, the Orioles are the victim of the Pirates. I'm sure they don't ever want to see us in a World Series ever again. Willie Stargell has that's really the big moment in that game is Willie Stargell in the 7th inning hits a home run, and that was really what put the Pirates up for good. And I don't remember, it was off a good pitcher too for the Orioles. I don't remember the pitcher's name, but I mean the Orioles always had really good pitching, but the Pirates hitting was able to get to it, and that's really the big moment in that game is Stargell hitting a home run. And like you said, Stargell's a Hall of Famer, and he hit a lot of home runs. And that was probably his most famous home run, I would say.
Yeah, good contrast to the previous two items that you mentioned where it was kind of, guys that weren't stars coming up big. This was a guy that was a star coming up big. And I remember that was in Baltimore, and I think the bullpen was like behind the outfield fence,
Right,
and he hit it right into the Pirates bullpen, because as soon as the ball comes down, you see a bunch of guys jumping up and down behind the fence.
I remember the guy from the right fielder from Baltimore hanging on the fence, like in desperation, like trying to catch it. I mean, I give him a good try, but it was like you weren't catching that ball.
No.
What's a major league line? You're gonna need a visa to get that one. Yeah.
Yes.
But Willie Pops was clutch, man, and that was definitely a clutch moment. And I mean, he had a lot of other home runs. A lot of home runs in the upper deck of Three River Stadium too. But moving to the Steelers, big moment, and I think you were there for this one. I was. 2009 AFC Championship game. Ravens 14, Steelers 23. The Ravens were driving late in the game. The defense was really good that year. The offense was kind of like they kind of did enough to get by. Like the offense would score enough points to get by. The offense wasn't great. It was kind of Ben and like a bunch of other guys. And we really didn't have a running back. Or I don't even know if Willie Barker was still around then.
It was Willie Parker, but he wasn't. He might
have been hurt or in the tail end of his career.
Yeah, they didn't have the same running game that they had when they had won the Super Bowl a few years earlier, and they had Parker and Bettis.
Yeah, and at the end of the game, like they're driving, and I remember they put because they always had like that was one of the few times like they really had two really good pass rushers, and they had Woodley and Harrison on either end, and it was like it would force the team to like, okay, you can't double team both of them. But then, like, for some reason, like, on that drive, LeBeau decided to move Harrison and Woodley to the same side. And if you watch that replay, like, I don't know, it's either Harrison or Woodley gets in there and hits Flacco. Like, you can see, like, Flacco definitely panics. And Paul Mull is watching him the whole way. And, great players make great plays and big moments. And that's another kind of like Willie Stargell. Like, he throws it up, and Paul Mull makes a great interception and returns it for a touchdown. And besides Willis McGahee getting knocked out about 5 minutes later, there wasn't much else that happened in this game. That was the end of the game, and the Steelers went on to win the Super Bowl that year. And but that was really, really a great moment for Troy Polamalu and that team with the Steelers. Were you at that game?
So I was, and I've been to a lot of sporting events, and I've never seen a stadium erupt the way it did when he made that play. We were jumping into the arms of like strangers. It was absolute pandemonium. And again, I've been to a lot of sporting events. I've never seen a reaction like that. People were just going ballistic. And it was a great play, like you said, by a great player stepping up at the right moment. It was only a 2-point lead at the time. So all the Ravens had to do was get into field goal range.
Yeah.
So it was really important, and that was such a hard-fought game, and that's one of the great plays in Steeler history.
Certainly. In 1992, Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals, the Penguins overcame a 4-1 deficit, mostly in the final seconds on the heroics of Lemieux and Yager. I think that kind of like. After that, the Blackhawks knew they were done. And the Blackhawks had a good team. They had, I think they had Belfort and Hossack as goalies, and the Penguins absolutely smoked both of them.
That's correct.
I don't think Hossack was quite the Hasek that he was later in his career. Like sometimes goalies are like kind of like pitchers. It takes a little bit for them to mature and, really find their stride. But Belfour was pretty good too. And the Penguins, boy, that's one of the most unbelievable like last minute of a hockey game. And the Penguins were a really good team that year. And the Blackhawks were too, but it just sometimes you want a team that's just a lot better.
Both of those teams had come into that game, I believe, not losing since round 2. I think they both swept their respective conference finals. So they were both like red hot coming into that game. And you just thought, okay, well, it's a blowout. The Blackhawks took game 1. And then Jágr, so they came back. Jágr scores that amazing goal. And then it's tied with like 20 seconds left. Mario draws a penalty. And then they have the face-off in the Blackhawks zone. He gets a rebound and he scores. And again, pandemonium. I wasn't there for that one, but absolute pandemonium in the Civic Arena. And my feeling watching that was just like, wow, Mario's better than everybody. It's almost not fair.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, that's just one of those great players make great plays when you need it the most kind of thing.
Yep.
And it really, like I said, I don't think the Blackhawks ever recovered from that. And they knew the Penguins were the better team. The Penguins went on the sweep. Who knows? Maybe that game, that series goes the Blackhawks' way, or at least goes deeper if they win that game 1, because that would have been what they would have given the Blackhawks home ice advantage. So
right,
it was just a big win.
So demoralizing to lose in that fashion for them, and you're right, they never recovered.
Yeah. So moving to 2005, the AFC divisional game against, once again, the poor Colts. They probably don't want to ever see the Steelers in the playoffs. That's normally bad news for them. I guess we'll go with the positive. Like, the negative is Jerome Bettis fumbled. The positive is you rarely recognize a quarterback for making a tackle. Well, that's what we're going to do here. Ben literally saved our season. Nick Harper decided not to just keep running to the right into the sideline and probably would have scored pretty easily because I don't think Ben would have caught him. For some reason, like, Ben gets him to run toward him in the middle of the field, and Ben makes a shoestring tackle. And I think they were on the other side of the 50, but they weren't in field goal range either. So Ben really, really bailed us out. The refs really stuck it to us because we really should have been able to kneel down there instead of having to run the ball. The only reason we had to run the ball is because the NFL felt bad for Tony Dungy because of some of his personal tribulations that year, and they wanted Peyton Manning to win a Super Bowl, so they decided that Troy Polamalu didn't make an interception that he did make. But it didn't matter anyway because the Steelers ended up hanging on to win. The defense stood up, forced them to a long field goal. Even though Vanderjagt hadn't missed in forever, Vanderjagt missed. So what are you going to do? And that's the way things went for Peyton Manning for a while there. And I don't hate Peyton Manning. I mean, he seems like a nice guy. His commercials are funny. But, yeah, it was nice to overcome the good enough to beat the Colts and their officials that day. And it was kind of self-inflicted, too. Like, Bettis never fumbled. I think it was Bettis' only fumble that year. And
that would have been – Bettis was going to retire. That was going to be his last play in the NFL, fumbling away a playoff game that we had iced.
It would have been Ernest Biner, yeah.
I mean, I think it would have been worse. I think it would have been like Joe Fasarchek, almost that level of – it would have been one of the lowest moments in the history of the Steelers, if not the lowest. It just would have been a disaster. And you're right, Ben making that tackle was just unbelievable. And those last 5 minutes of that game were just enough to – I remember there was a story of there was a guy down at Chupka's, I think, that actually had a heart attack after that play. Like, literally, there was a story here locally where there was a fan that literally had a heart attack. They had to haul him away to the hospital.
I literally, Bettis, and I like Jerome Bettis, and he's a great Steeler, but man, he made me cuss in front of my mother. I mean, I literally stringed together a string of expletives that are, I literally called him every name in the book when it was like, the Steelers have played the most conservative second half. Like, I just remember that there was a drive there where they went for it on 4th and 1. They didn't even score. It was like people call that the biggest non-scoring drive. They were just keep the ball for Peyton Manning, keep the ball away, keep our defense fresh. And the defense played great that game. Played great. And I knew we had a chance. We had lost to them in the regular season, but I didn't see anything from the Colts when we lost to them that I thought the Steelers couldn't compete with. Like, Ike Taylor got burnt because he bid on a play action. It wasn't like the old Chad Scott, Dwayne Washington, oh, I can't keep up with Marvin Harrison. Like, I knew Ike could cover Marvin Harrison. And I thought we could cover Reggie Wayne, too. It was Dallas Clark end up kind of burning us. Like, Paul Maul missed the tackle. And that's an insane game. That's another one we could probably do an hour on.
Yeah, we definitely need to dive into the details of that one at some point because it was an insane game.
Yeah, I remember driving home after that. People were going nuts. People were in the street. Like, I've never seen people celebrate like just a regular, like a playoff win like that before. Moving on, next memorable moment. The Super Bowl IX, Pittsburgh. It's our first championship that the Steelers had ever won in the history since 1933. So that was definitely the most memorable moment. I mean, the first person to score, it's a good trivia question, was Dwight White. And Stan Savran told a story where he was like actually sitting there asking Dwight White who scored the first points in a Super Bowl for the Steelers. And Dwight White is like, Franco. Frenchie, Franco, Rocky Bleier. It's like, no, it's you. You sacked Fran Tarkington for a safety. But probably the more memorable moment was when they handed the trophy to the Chief, Art Rooney Sr. It was like a Lifetime Achievement Award, like hanging in, and the Chief was so beloved, and just kind of like one of those great NFL moments to where there was nobody that was upset. I don't even think Al Davis was upset that the Chief finally won a Super Bowl after being in the league for over 30 years and not even getting a sniff.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this in the episode we did about Art Rooney, but the players even said that was a big motivation that season was to get that championship for Mr. Rooney. So definitely a big moment, an emotional moment.
Yeah. Going back to 2009, Super Bowl 43, James Harrison had at the end of the half, I think the Steelers were up 14-7. And Kurt Warner drops back the pass, and he kind of like this is like James Harrison just kind of freelancing. He kind of dropped back into like kind of like a zone, and Kurt Warner threw it right to him. He kind of baited Kurt Warner to do it. And normally you catch it in your own end zone. There's like 8 seconds left. You probably just like kind of fall down and take the ball to 20. Well, that's not James Harrison's style. He decides he's going to try and return it for a touchdown. And it's one of the most unbelievable defensive touchdown runs I've ever seen, because like they get out to like the 20 and he's in deep trouble, and like Deshae Townsend is like running beside him like, hand me the ball, and like Harrison's like, no, it's not happening. And so there's like a bunch of blocks, and he runs like 99 yards, gets down to like the 2-yard line, and Larry Fitzgerald, who's like another one of my favorite players, and there's probably another reason, like almost pulls like a Don Beebe, like almost catches like Harrison from behind, and they both roll into the end zone, but it does. Harrison barely gets to the 99 yards at the end of the half. It's a 14-point swing, because that could have been, if they that would have been a tie game to 21-7, and that ended up being pretty big at the end of the game.
Yeah, that's such a famous play that'll be relived and reshown forever. And one of the things that people always forget about that play is that Fitzgerald, Harrison's running down the Arizona sideline, and one of the Arizona players, I think it was one of their defensive players,
he got in his way. Yeah,
he's standing on the white part of the sideline, which you're not supposed to do. And Fitzgerald actually had to stop and like go around him and he still caught Harrison at the 2. But if that guy doesn't, if that guy's standing back and letting Fitzgerald just run free, Fitzgerald probably catches him at the 15-yard line or so, and then the half's over. And it's a memorable play still because they stopped him from scoring, but it's nowhere near the same level of shift in the game. And so that guy standing on the sidelines, prevented Larry Fitzgerald from catching Harrison.
And I remember they interviewed Ken Whisenhunt like right after that, and Ken Whisenhunt, to his credit, wasn't like panicked or anything. Yeah, it was a big play, but we got a whole half to overcome it. And I mean, guess what else was he supposed to say? Like, oh, boo-hoo, we lost the Super Bowl already. No, I mean, I give him credit for keeping his composure, because if I was the coach, I definitely would have lost it there. That was ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, that was such a big play. It was such a pivotal moment in that game. But to their credit, Arizona, they kept their wits about them and, ended up making a game of it. Going back to 2009, 2009 was a big year in Pittsburgh sports. Game 7 against the Red Wings. I remember, I mean, you mentioned Max Talbot. He did score 2 big goals in this game, but I think the more memorable moment is Fleury at the end of the game, making that big save on, was it Lindstrom? Or was it? Yeah, Nick Lindstrom. And I mean, if Fleury, that's like probably a bigger, people remember the Peter Angelo save. I think that's bigger than the Peter Angelo save. It's Game 7 of the Stanley Cup. It literally won the Stanley Cup for the Penguins that year.
Yes.
And I mean, it's just a great save. He had to come across his crease and get big, and Fleury just made a tremendous play. And like I said, Fleury's going to be a legend in Pittsburgh forever. Even though he's left and gone to Vegas, people love him. And he's a good player and seems like a decent person, and people love Fleury. And this is one of the reasons why that save will always be a legend here.
Absolutely. Another just great moment.
Moving to 1974, the draft. The 1974 NFL draft. It's definitely the most successful draft in Steelers history. I don't know if there's been an NFL draft where another team can top this, but in 1974, they drafted, the Steelers, 4 Hall of Famers, and that's unheard of. They drafted Lynn Swann, Mike Webster, Jack Lambert, and John Stallworth, and that basically set them up for their dynasty run from there on out to the end of the 70s. And just to literally draft, not like if you draft like one pretty good player that plays for you for 5 to 10 years, you've done pretty well. But to draft 4 players that played that, all of them played, probably over 5 to 10 years, and all of them are in the Hall of Fame, and all of them won 4 Super Bowls. It's just a tremendous achievement, and I don't know if you'll ever see anything like that ever again.
No, I don't think you ever will. And it was, people just always point to that draft. I mean, how do you draft 4 Hall of Famers in the same draft? That's unheard of. So yeah, it's just one of those unique, probably once in a lifetime kind of things.
Yeah, I'm sure it's on one of those NFL top 10s, where yeah, the NFL Network always does top 10 drafts. I mean, if that isn't number 1 in your top 10 list, I don't know what is. Going back to 2009 again, the tippy-toe catch at the end of that Super Bowl. The Harrison play, if this play doesn't happen, the James Harrison's probably MVP of that Super Bowl, right? I mean, but
arguably.
But the like I said, Arizona kept their wits about them and didn't panic. It took them a quarter to kind of get going, but in the fourth quarter, Larry Fitzgerald, who had a tremendous playoff, him and Kurt Warner just were pretty unstoppable. That whole playoffs became unstoppable. I mean, they literally smoked our defense. And I as much as I knew Ike Taylor could cover Marvin Harrison, is as much as I knew Ike Taylor couldn't cover Larry Fitzgerald, because Ike's biggest asset was he's kind of tall and lanky and fast. But what he's really bad at was he's kind of like the Dwayne Washington, where like if it's a jump ball, he always seems to bat the ball to the other guy. And Larry Fitzgerald, I've seen him play in college, seen him play in the pros, is the best wide receiver. I think he's better than Chris Carter, better than Terrell Owens, better than any of those jump ball guys. He's the best jump ball wide receiver I've ever seen play football. If you throw a jump ball to Larry Fitzgerald, he's coming down with it. And it doesn't really matter who you put on him. And that's kind of what happened is the Cardinals scored a lot of points and took the lead with 2 minutes and some change left. So Ben drives him down the field, and it leads to the is there a name for this catch? I don't know. The catch? No,
Yeah, I don't think so, but there needs to be one at some point.
Tippy toe touchdown? I don't know. That sounds stupid.
It would make a good statue, I can tell you that.
But Santonio makes an unbelievable catch on his tippy toes after missing the play before. Everyone forgets, he kind of missed one. Ben threw it a little high, but I think that's where Ben had to throw it. But he missed that one, but then the next play, he makes a tremendous catch on the sidelines against two defenders for the Cardinals. And the Steelers win the Super Bowl, one of the most memorable moments probably in Steeler history. I mean, outside of, there's one more left. That's, I think everybody kind of knows what that one is coming up. But it's just, I don't know. It's surprising it doesn't have its own name. It's it launched the Steelers to the 6 Super Bowl wins. They were the first team in the Super Bowl era to have 6 Super Bowl wins. So,
yeah, I mean, winning the 6th Super Bowl on a last-second miracle kind of touchdown pass, it was just the absolute. I just remember thinking at the time, this is like the absolute height of being a Steelers fan. I kind of even thought will it ever get better than this? I mean, that was such a huge thing, so dramatic, and it's something you can relive forever. And Santonio is another guy. He certainly wasn't a mediocre player, but he was a very good player, but it wasn't for a very long period of time.
He kind of reminds like LaMarr Woodley. You think there should have been more out of him than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You feel like he left something on the table.
He did. But that year, just even to get to the Super Bowl, we mentioned earlier the Ravens championship game. Everybody remembers the Polamalu interception, but Santonio scored an amazing touchdown in that game. In the San Diego playoff game the week before, he had a punt return for a touchdown. He was so instrumental in getting the Steelers to the Super Bowl, just as Fitzgerald was getting the Cardinals to where they were. And to see him do that in the last seconds, it's the Steelers could have a 2-14 season, and you could queue up that play and watch it over and over again and still be happy.
But probably the second biggest play in Steelers history, I would argue.
I would agree.
Going all the way back to 1984, Reagan was president. I was in second grade. Things weren't going too well for the Penguins. They were probably drawing about 5,000 people in the Civic Arena. And I don't think they had made the playoffs in 2 years. And they were a pretty bad hockey franchise with not a lot of stars. So at the end of 83-84, Eddie Johnson decides to tank for the team because back then, now they have the lottery system where the top 5 teams just get a certain percentage chance at getting the top pick to keep teams from doing this. So, but the Penguins, they knew that the Mario Lemieux, this guy Mario from the Quebec Junior League or wherever he was playing, or the Montreal League, they knew he was really good and they really needed to get him. So they tanked at the end of the season so they get the top draft pick. And that's probably been one of the more instrumental things in Pittsburgh sports history. And that's why it's a memorable moment. It's a pivotal moment. The Penguins probably aren't in Pittsburgh if they don't tank and get him for this team, because he literally saved the franchise in hockey in Pittsburgh. He made hockey. Hockey really wasn't that big of a sport back then. It could have been the other Pittsburgh Pipers or, any of the other lesser, minor league teams that have come and gone in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I would even up that. I wouldn't even say probably. I would say definitely. There's no Penguins if they don't draft Mario. And uh, tanking's not tanking's not easy to do because you're never going to have everybody on board with it. If you're a player, you're not you're not going to intentionally lose. You need to play somewhere the next season, and you don't want to look bad. So you also have to do it in a way that doesn't look like you're tanking, which is also hard to do. So um, it's not that easy of a thing to do. It'd be another one that Steve that'd be worth a great deep dive because there's so many good stories about
Oh
stuff
yeah,
they
like
had to do.
they like some like a goaltender was playing good and they sent him down to like the minors. It was like, oh, you're playing too
Right,
good. You got to go to the minors, buddy. It's
right,
like, like
right.
it's not like Eddie Johnson like never admits it, but it's if you look at the transactions, the moves he made, like it's pretty blatantly obvious. And like he was telling the coach who to play and stuff. It's yeah.
Yeah, and again, you have to like be very careful because the league's not gonna go for anything that goes against competitive balance. And again, the players have nothing to gain by finishing last. You
No, I
know,
mean, yeah, because they definitely affect their contracts and stuff.
right, right. And what if they want to get picked up by another team the next year? So, yeah, it was sort of like the Rachel Phelps plot from the movie Major League.
Yeah.
You know, assemble a bad enough roster and then hope that things go really bad, and then make moves during the season to keep that going. It would definitely make for an interesting movie. And again, um, call it what you want, but it saves hockey in Pittsburgh. It has an amazing ripple effect on the city itself as well, because of all the things Mario has done. So, yeah, that's a huge moment.
Sticking with some off the field stuff, 1980, 85. I remember this because I was still young. Once again, I was probably in third grade when this happened, but I remember this is the Pirates were for sale. The Galbraiths, who had owned the team, wanted out, and this is after the drug trials, and so the Pirates were in deep trouble. They were like that, like Stargell had retired, Parker was gone. They were they were a pretty bad baseball team, and the ownership wanted out, I guess. And there was a serious talk of the Pirates moving and leaving Pittsburgh. Well, the mayor during that time was Mayor Richard Caligiuri, and a lot of background too in the city was this is the 80s, and after the 70s, like all the steel mills basically closed in the 80s. Like that was the end. Like I remember driving in the Parkway East, and there used to be a big steel mill there down on Second Avenue, and that one it just stopped. You know, that and the one in the waterfront, they were all basically going out of business. So the city was, yeah, that was kind of like the story of the decade of the '80s. It was kind of like the finishing up of like all the businesses leaving Pittsburgh from the '70s. So, and times were really tough in Pittsburgh, and I mean, whether you agree with it or not, Mayor Caligiuri formed a group of public and private partnerships. Some corporations that were still left in the city and committed to staying in the city, along with the actual government of the city, invested in the Pirates and bought the Pirates and got them to stay in Pittsburgh. And that's a big deal. I mean, they hadn't gotten PNC Park, which was funny because years later, Sophie Masloff, because Mayor Caligiuri had gotten sick and died, Sophie proposed remember Roberto Clemente Park? Does anybody? And she was laughed out of town for that. And then 5 to 10 years later, they're building PNC Park. But that was definitely a pivotal moment. But, another team that might not, they could have. Imagine if the Penguins don't draft Mario, and if Mayor Caligiuri can't find the private businesses, you could have lost both the Pirates and the Penguins in like 2 to 3 years, and you would have been just left with the Steelers. I mean, it's along with the city that was already reeling from the loss of the steel industry, that would have been pretty tough to overcome. I mean,
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it really is. And another one with ripple effect. PNC Park never gets built. You never have that rejuvenation of the North Shore in Pittsburgh. It just would have a ton of ripple effects had the Pirates just been moved out of town.
I put this one a little ahead of the Pens drafting Mario because it wouldn't have happened. But I think it's big too. In '99, Mario finally buys the Penguins with Ron Burkle, and this finally solidified the future of hockey in Pittsburgh. You knew finally the Penguins weren't going to go anywhere, even though they threatened to go to Kansas City to get the arena built. But I don't think Mario ever was going to really move them. But I mean, you got to negotiate sometimes with these politicians, but that's really a direct from '84 from them drafting him and him having such a successful career. And obviously, he grew up and, he basically spent his, young adult years in the city and, falling in love with the city and the people here. And, it's just a great story with Mario, basically coming from a whole nother country where he spoke a different language and falling in love with the city and moving here and becoming a part of our community. It's an amazing thing.
We talked about this in our episode that we did on the goal that saved the Penguins, the goal that Jágr scored that year in the playoffs. And we talked about what a big risk it was for Mario to do this and how he risked losing a ton of money. It would have been so much easier for him to sign a 2-year contract with the Rangers and recoup all his money. And he didn't know Pittsburgh or certainly the Penguins franchise, which had stiffed him royally, didn't know them anything, but he felt it was his duty to the people of Pittsburgh to buy the team and keep them in Pittsburgh. I think he's one of the great, not all-time Pittsburgh athletes, just one of the great all-time Pittsburghers, period.
Yeah.
And that was a huge moment because, like the previous one you mentioned, it's one that we don't have a franchise probably if not for that moment.
Yeah. Now we're getting up into the big two moments here. So everybody, if you've been following along, you probably can guess which two they are. And I'm going to go with 1972. Obviously, the divisional playoff game against the Raiders. Some guy named Franco catches the ball out of the air and rides in on his white horse and saves the Steelers season. The Steelers had been leading this game, I think, was it 7-6 or 7-0 or something?
It was 6-0.
6-0 when Stabler just runs he pulls off a scramble for 30 yards and scores, and they go up 7-6 with 2 minutes left to go or a minute and a half. And the Steelers really didn't have an offense back then. It was kind of Franco to the left, Franco to the right. Hey, let's mix it up and send Rocky Bleier up the middle. They didn't really have a very good offense back then. But on 4th and 10, Bradshaw, who's under all kinds of duress, the Raiders almost sack him twice, just throws up an absolute prayer to Frenchy Fuqua. And it definitely bounced off Jack Tatum for sure. Yeah, that ball hit Jack Tatum, no doubt. And Franco runs in and scoops the ball. And the reason it had to hit Tatum is because there was a rule. I don't know why this was a rule, but back then there was a rule that 2 offensive players couldn't touch it in concession. I guess they didn't want you to volleyball bat a pass to another player. I never
understood that either.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could think of is you would somehow have a guy jump up and just tip the ball to another guy or something.
Yeah, but so what? And first of all, that'd be really hard to do. And so what if they did? I never understood why that was a rule back then. And it's funny because if that play happened today, there'd be very little controversy because no one would care who touched the ball. But that was the rule at the time.
Yeah, and then there's still kind of you can't really tell if the ball hits the ground or not. But it doesn't look like it does. And the Raiders are kind of up there with the Cowboys. They whine and cry. Phil Villapiano still whines about it. He's pretty funny. He's actually pretty funny to hear talk about. Actually, I kind of like him because it's so funny because he gets so irritated by it.
I like him too, and he's turned it into a nice little side business for himself, just being the kind of the foil there. And I think a lot of Pittsburgh fans are just growing to like him because he's just, I think he's not.
It's in good nature. It seems like it's in good nature.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah, it's not like a bitter. I hate this. This is so unfair. it is good natured. And Franco, I guess, calls him every year on the anniversary. He calls him on the phone on the anniversary of the play. So those guys have definitely made that into a long lasting kind of fun thing.
Yeah, and another reason it's so big is like the Steelers hadn't won anything ever in the history of the franchise. It's not even a playoff game. And that was their first playoff win. Unfortunately, the next year they played the Dolphins, and the Dolphins won on a fake punt. So that was kind of disappointing. They didn't win a Super Bowl that year, and I think that's why I don't make it a top moment, just because it didn't actually directly deliver a championship. That's the only kind of like strike against it. But it did start the ball rolling on their dynasty, and they would win 4 Super Bowls later. And probably without that play, maybe they don't win, maybe they do. I don't know.
It's sort of consistently been celebrated, and I think even recently when the NFL did their 100 greatest moments, I think that was still number one as just the greatest moment in NFL history. And it's a good point that it won them a playoff game and then they lost the next week. And I think it's like nobody really seems to remember that for whatever reason.
There's like a million people that have. I was in the stadium. Yeah, there was only 30,000. It wasn't even a sellout. There was only 30,000 people there at the game.
And a lot of people had left early because it looked like it was over. So, and it wasn't on TV. It was blacked out. Back then, they blacked out games locally so that people would come to the stadium. And it's taken on a life of its own. That place has taken on a life of its own, and will always be remembered.
Well, didn't your dad's friend leave early? And he went in the squirrel tunnels when the play happened.
Yeah, my dad was.
I couldn't imagine coming out of the squirrel tunnel. What? Huh? What?
Yeah, my dad was at the.
What just happened?
He was at the game, and the guy he went with was one of the people that left early. My dad stuck around, and was one of the few eyewitnesses to that play. So, it's just it's a memorable moment. It's coming up on the 50th anniversary here in a couple of years, and I'm sure there'll be a lot to do about that when it hits the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, they did. ESPN did those Peyton's Places with Peyton Manning, and that was one of them. And that was I watched that episode, and that was a fun episode because, like, once again, he had Frenchie Fuqua, Terry Bradshaw, Franco, and Phil Real or whatever his name is from the Raiders, and it was fun. And they tried to recreate it with people, and nobody could do it. Not even Peyton Manning could do it. It was just all in good fun, and it's a fun play, and it's a great moment in Pittsburgh sports history. Even though I wasn't alive to see it, it's before my time, but it's so ingrained in Pittsburgh lore. Much like the next play, the top moment. I would put this as the top moment in Pittsburgh sports history. I can't think of another moment that would be bigger. And it's way before either of our time. But you talk to people that lived through it. And so obviously in 1960 in Game 7, the Pirates were – what was the final score? It was like 10-9 or something.
Yeah, it was high scoring for a baseball game.
Insane. And if you watch the replay of that game, which do you know how they found the replay? There was no tape of this game for like 30 years. Do you know how
Bing Crosby.
You know the story behind that?
Yeah, Bing Crosby, who was one of the
Pirates,
co-owners of the Pirates.
Owner,
so like Steve said, people didn't have, there was no VCR back then or DVR or whatever. Yeah. And so if you wanted to record something, you set up a camera and you filmed like the TV set, I guess.
And I think you had to film it in a mirror because it was backwards or something like that.
Yeah.
Something weird.
It was a whole process. I think it was called, I want to say Kinescope process or something like that. And so Bing Crosby was in Europe or something, and he had somebody film the game for him because he couldn't watch it.
And he was a huge Pirates fan. Yeah, Bing Crosby was a huge Pirates fan.
Well, he was part of one of the owners, so yeah, I guess he would have something invested in him. And they found that film years later. And you actually got to watch the broadcast of the game. That was really neat to be able to see that because before all they had was sort of like grainy film footage, and it was neat to see the actual broadcast.
And there's a lot of like weird plays. Like in the 8th inning, they tag a guy. I think the Pirates tag a guy at first, but they call him save. And the guy, if you watch it looks like he's out. And like if you listen to the radio broadcast, Bob Prince even said that he thought he was out.
Yeah,
And
there
then
was
there's the guy who's the shortstop gets hit in the throat.
Tony
Like,
Kubek. Yeah, gets hit in
yeah,
the throat. Yep.
yeah, and I think did they score a run? I think they scored a run on that.
I think so. Yeah, it would
Yeah,
have been an out otherwise. So there were some breaks to just even get them to that point.
but it happens early. Like what's his name? Bill Mazeroski's the first batter, and it's like the second pitch in, and the guy throws a ball. Ralph Terry throws a ball, and next one he just decides, well, I better throw a strike, so he throws a meatball, and like he literally like crushes it. And to hit a home run in Forbes Field, you really had to hit a home run. It was a big field. It was so big they used to leave the batting cage out in center field. But the wall, if you go to Oakland, the wall still stands, the part of the wall there. And a couple years ago, I actually went and I hung out with the guys. They play the radio broadcast of Game 7 on that day. I forget what day in October it is, but they replay the game. And that's always something fun to do if you're bored in October and it's a nice day out. You stand by the wall, and they have like people selling popcorn and stuff, and people hang out and listen to the rebroadcast of the game. But it won the Pirates a championship. It was the last Pirates World Series for 11 years. It was their first year World Series since 1925. I think it was only their first appearance since 1927. They'd been really bad in the 50s.
Yep.
You know, they had Rob Kiner. That was about it. That was the infamous Branch Rickey quote: "We can lose with or without, with or without you." But yeah, it's 1960 World Series. The Maz home run. He's probably in the Hall. He's in the Hall of Fame probably because of that. If he doesn't hit that home run, he's probably not in the Hall of Fame.
Agreed.
Yeah, but Maz was always so nice and humble about it, and he's a legend, much like Franco or Marc-Andre Fleury or Mario Lemieux. That's kind of your Mount Rushmore of Pittsburgh sports. There used to be a mural downtown. Remember that on the one building of Maz running the bases, but
There's a statue now on the north side of him
yeah,
doing the same
yeah,
thing.
outside right field, yeah.
Yep.
But well, that's it. That's the top moments. I hope you agreed with them or didn't. I don't know. If we missed any, let us know. What's our website again?
Yeah, so check out our website. It's pittsburghsportsmemories.weebly.com. You can hit us up there. You can hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And yeah, let us know if you agree, disagree.
Well, thanance for tuning in. This sure was fun reminiscing about all these great memories, and have a great day.